Hello, hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So
They're
we've
fr-
got people coming in.
yes. Hello. So many of you.
Absolutely. I guess I'll kick off with the um, boring formulaic stuff. Uh, well, I'll do the intro first, yeah. Hello and welcome to this session. This is about the Knights Templar and Friday the 13th with Bree and Fry of Pontifacts podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome
Hello.
to Pontifacts and Intelligent Speech. I'm Bree,
So,
and that's Fry.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And if you've
so,
never,
so
oh, go ahead.
no, please, sorry, apologies.
If you've never heard us before, we are a papal history podcast ranking all of the popes from Peter to Francis.
So a few things to cover before we begin. I am neither Bree nor Fry. I am John. I will be helping with tech support and moderating the chat. This session is being recorded. I don't work for Zoom, but if you are having problems, please mention it in the chat and I will see if I can help. This session will be roughly 20 minutes of presentation, followed by roughly 20 minutes of Q&A, but has a hard stop at 40 minutes, and Bree told me that, so I'm assuming that means that it will happen. And with that, it gives
Yeah.
me great pleasure to introduce our speakers. Bree is the history host of Pontifacts. She holds a history degree from the University of the Fraser Valley, specializing in Renaissance Florence and the Medici family. And Fry doesn't like filling in forms about herself. Their show, Pontifacts, Their show, Pontifacts, is a light-hearted, slightly blasphemous papal history podcast ranking all the popes from Peter to Francis. In the ever-important terms of dumplings, Brie likes anything that doesn't have pork or seafood in it, and Fry likes ravioli. And with that, ladies, gentlemen, and other delightful people, Brie and Fry of Pontifacts.
Thank you so much for the introduction. That was beautiful. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. If you want to throw up some extra energy to curse Zoom this morning, please feel free to do that. It's been a morning, but we are here to talk about Pope things. And for this year's theme of deception, it's only fitting that we talk about a time that a Pope's deception and complicity caused many deaths, a curse, and a long-standing superstition. So today we'll be talking about the dissolution of the Knights Templar and the origins of the Friday the 13th myth.
All
And
right.
because I am currently working on the beginning of the crusade for our episodes next year, this feels particularly on theme. So, Fry's got our beautiful slideshow up.
I
Perfect.
do.
Don't you love this template I found? It's
You
perfect.
found the best template.
So, while I am sure that everyone has heard of the Knights Templar, separating the facts from the myths can be a little bit more challenging. So, to dive in, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ in the Temple of Solomon, more commonly known as the Knights Templar, were a French military order founded in 1118 for the Crusades, initially to defend pilgrims and later to aid in the taking of the Holy Land. After being formally recognized by Pope Innocent II in 1139, the order proliferated, becoming one of the most skilled, popular, and wealthy orders. And that last part is the most important part, because the Knights Templar didn't just become wealthy from plundering and conquest, but also from developing financial policy and taking financial risk, like banking and landholding and managing businesses and offering loans. And that
I would
paid
not
up.
want to take a loan from the Knights Templar. I'm sorry.
Oh, but people did, Fry.
Maybe they just didn't know better.
This paid off tremendously, leaving them so wealthy that rumors spread that the Knights Templar possessed the lost treasure of King Solomon, which, was fitting because the Templar headquarters in Jerusalem was at Temple Mount, which was long rumored to be the site of King Solomon's temple and how the order got its official name. However, by the beginning of the 1300s, support for the order had started to wane. The crusade efforts at this point were largely unsuccessful, and there was growing pressure in Europe to consolidate the many crusading military orders, to unify resources, and also to limit their influence and wealth by putting them under a single king, which in turn would become the king of Jerusalem if the Holy Land was conquered. So, pretty sweet gig. And this brings us to Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Templar Order. De Molay had been elected as the Grand Master in 1292 on the basis that he was an outspoken advocate for reform and the fact that he was a strong opponent to this idea about merging the order with other orders, which de Molay thought would undermine their strength and the Crusades. And of course, why would they want to share all of that wealth that they had made with everyone? However, de Molay's opposition to merging and his ambitions for the order put him at odds with the King of France, Philip IV. You see, King Philip absolutely wanted to see the crusading military orders merged for several reasons personally. And he'd certainly like it if they were put under his control, making him the de facto future king of Jerusalem. But more importantly than just being the future king of Jerusalem, King Philip was deeply in debt to the Templars.
Oh, he took out a loan.
He took out all the loans. He took advantage of their financial strategies, particularly the loans. And now that that money that he'd borrowed had been spent, he had no intention of paying it back.
He wanted to be in charge, so he definitely didn't have to pay it back.
Exactly. That's exactly what he wants, right? So this is becoming a fairly imminent problem for Philip, because at the same time that de Molay is resisting the order of merging and being put under his authority, he's also calling on Philip to repay his loans so that he could do the reform work that he wants to do. And the delinquent king was none too happy for the Templars to be airing out his dirty laundry like that. How dare you tell everybody that I have debts to you? And because he had no intention of repaying the Templars any of what he owed them, he decided to turn to the Pope, Clement V, who's already on our screen there.
Yes.
But before we add Clement to this fire, it's important that we understand that Philip already had quite a complicated relationship with the papacy. The last significant pope, Boniface VIII, had issued an excommunication against Philip because Philip kept taxing the clergy and repeatedly disregarding church authority.
Spending all this money.
Yeah. So Philip had responded to that excommunication by sending an army to attack and kidnap the Pope, who was held prisoner on unfounded charges of, and I want you to hear this clearly because it's going to come back, heresy and sodomy.
Both of them.
Yep, heresy and sodomy. This is what he's charging the Pope with. And while imprisoned, Pope Boniface was famously slapped by the king's minister and severely beaten. That's that famous Pope slap. And even though he was released, he died only a month later of shock from how horribly beaten he was. The next Pope, Benedict XI, lasted less than a year and was rumored to have been poisoned by one of Philip's other ministers. So the next Pope...
He couldn't slap every Pope.
He could not slap every Pope. He couldn't get close enough. So he dies of shock that he's so badly beat. And then we have the one who was poisoned, probably. So the next Pope is our guy, Clement V, who, notably, was a Frenchman and elected through plenty of pressure from Philip. So Clement becomes the Pope with the full understanding that he's there to do what Philip wanted, like puppet Pope, right? We know what that's like. And if we ever had any doubt about how much sway the French king had over the papacy, Pope Clement... So far, you're giving away all the spoilers, Fry.
I don't know how to go back.
I think it's the backspace button. It's all good.
I did it.
Perfectly. Okay. So Yeah, I didn't lose my place. So if we ever had any doubt about how much sway the French King Philip had over the papacy, Pope Clement is the pope who moved the papacy from Rome to Avignon, starting the Avignon papacy in 1309. So, puppet pope, the most puppet. So literally on the day that Clement is consecrated as pope, King Philip approaches him about this whole Templars issue. You see, Philip had been brought accounts that the Templars were engaging in inappropriate rites, which included, wait for it, heresy and sodomy.
Again.
Yeah. But also like fraud and usury too because of his personal loan issues. He also made it clear to Pope Clement that if he wasn't appropriately scandalized and didn't dissolve the order and allow him to confiscate all of their wealth for himself, he was just kind of going to go back to that habit of disregarding the church and do everything himself. And to minimally credit Clement, his first action was to create an actual inquiry, even when Philip was breathing down his neck. But obviously, that was not enough for Philip, and he started to plot a mass arrest across his kingdom, knowing he could basically pressure Clement after the fact into consenting, or at least like retroactively legitimizing his actions. And so, here's the big line. On Friday, the 13th of October, 1307, the day of bad luck, Jacques de Molay and all of the Templars across France were unexpectedly raided, rounded up, arrested, and thrown into prison on charges of, you guessed it, heresy and sodomy.
I appreciate that it is October's Friday the 13th.
Yeah, exactly. It's the whole bad luck
Because
thing.
it could be anyone. It could have been February.
Could have been, but nope, it's October. We have to be spooky from the beginning, and there's more spooky to come. Oh, and while they were at it arresting everybody and throwing them in prison, Philip also instructed his army to just go ahead and confiscate any money or treasure in the Templars' possession, because
he doesn't want a loan. He's just going to take it.
Yeah, he's just going to take it all back and be like, I'm just not, I don't have to pay you anymore, and now I have more wealth. And for the next 7 years, the imprisoned Templars were starved, beaten, and tortured, while the accusations made against them increased in intensity and ridiculousness. So
they're even worse. More.
Even worse. Yep. These accusations included fraud, usury, financial corruption, but the heresy and sodomy claims became absolutely salacious, right? According to the accusations, the Templar initiation rite included making a deal with the devil and worshiping satanic idols, denying Christ, and profane acts of unnatural lust.
Unnatural.
Quoting Templar historian Malcolm Barber, when they were received into the order, they denied Christ 3 times and spat 3 times on his image. Then, stripped of their secular clothing and brought naked before the senior Templar in charge of their reception, they kissed him on the lower spine, or bum, the navel, and finally on the mouth, in shame of human dignity according to the profane rite of their order. Moreover, by a vow of their profession, they are obliged to indulge in carnal relations with other members of the order, being required without the possibility of refusal. Finally, these unclean people forsake the font of life-giving water and make offerings to the idols.
Wow.
So, there's some bum kissing, there's some mouth kissing, there's some you gotta bone everybody here and you can't say no to it. It's a whole thing. And under torture, many of the Templars confessed to the above charges because torture makes people admit to doing anything, no matter how
the torture
untrue.
Stop. Yeah.
Yeah. Even the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, himself confessed under torture to parts of this obscene initiation rite. You can go to the next slide.
Now I can go? Okay.
Yes.
There we go.
There he is being interrogated. However, Not surprisingly, as soon as the torture was stopped, many of these confessions were emphatically recanted. Of course, by then, it's too late, and Molay's confession was then used to pressure Pope Clement into expanding the mass arrests and the remaining to capture all of the remaining Templars across Europe in the papal bull Pastoralis Preeminentiae. The Pope was also under increased pressure from King Philip to dissolve the order, and Clement basically dragged his heels on this. However, in the wake of so many forced confessions, Philip literally threatened to wage war on the Pope, and so Pope Clement had no choice but to call a council, and in the trials that followed, 54 Templars, including Grandmaster Jacques de Molay, were sentenced to death by burning at the stakes.
That's so many.
And the Knights Templar was officially dissolved by papal bull. Even, I think the next one is the execution.
There's the burning.
There's the burning.
Yes.
So, the executions were set for March of 1314 in Paris. On the 11th, over 50 Templars were burned at the stake near Saint Antoine, with almost every single man who was there to be executed recanting their confessions.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, you would want to be innocent, or at least profess your innocence in this case.
Well, then you wouldn't want to be burned at the stake.
Yeah, that still happened. And on March 18th, Jacques de Molay and 3 of the lesser masters were dragged out to an island in the River Seine, clad in their Templar vestments, and tied to pyres that had been constructed specifically to burn slowly. The crimes they were charged with were read out again as a public intent on humiliation. But according to eyewitness Geoffrey of Paris, Jacques de Molay was undaunted, showed no fear, and as the pyres were lit, the Grand Master had his final say. Now, many versions of Jacques de Molay's final declarations have been recorded throughout history, including decrying the king and the Pope and the lack of fair trial, recanting his confessions, and claiming that God would avenge their deaths. However, most famously, it is also said that he cursed both Pope Clement and King Philip by saying, "Sirs, know without any doubt that all those who are against us, for us will have to suffer. Let evil swiftly befall those who have been wrong. Let evil swiftly befall those who have wrongly condemned us. God will avenge our death." Other versions tell us that Molay declared that within 1 year and 1 day of his death, both the Pope and the king would die.
Did they?
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes, they did.
Glorious.
Pope Clement V died on April 20th of 1314, just a month after the executions, from a severe case of either dysentery or bowel cancer.
Oh, both of those are awful.
Yeah. And then lightning struck the church where his body lay awaiting burial, causing a massive fire and completely destroying the Pope's body.
Amazing.
Then, just 7 months later, King Philip died of a stroke while out hunting on November 29th of 1314.
I love it. I love that they got their due.
But that's not it. In the next 14 years, repeated misfortune befell Philip's line, leading to the death of all his sons and his grandsons by 1328, ending the House of Capet and the Capetian kings entirely.
Also great.
The bad luck curse claimed them all.
Love that journey.
But of course, we also have to consider how accurate Molay's curse was, and the fact that that likely means it was written into the sources after the fact. But it's a good deal of fun to think he had his revenge.
Mm-hmm. It's fun to think that he did it prior.
Let's live with the curse. But overall, this moment has left a massive black mark on the papacy, lasting so long not only in the myth of Friday the 13th being a day of ill omen, but with ongoing historical impacts. Like in June of 2011, a revived chapter of the Knights Templar attempted to sue Pope Benedict XVI, claiming billions like $150 billion of damages for the possessions that were seized from the Knights Templar by King Philip and Pope Clement, and demanding an apology for the murders of the innocent men of the Templars.
Like with inflation is what they were doing. This is
Yeah,
how much it'd be
exactly.
worth today.
So much gold, so wealthy. Finally, we should acknowledge the work of historian Barbara Frail, who in 2001 discovered a misfiled church document, now called the Chinon Parchment, which documented that in 1308, after the mass arrest, Pope Clement V did absolve the Templars of the charge of heresy. I mean, fat lot good it did them. They were
Right.
still all burned at the stake and tortured horribly for 7 years, but it goes to show that the Pope tried a little, but was still very complicit. And before we finish, it is important to note that, of course, this is not the only purported origin to the association of the Friday the 13th with bad luck. There are also suggested origins in Norse mythology and early Christianity and pagan practice. But given that the Knights Templar are often massive in the public imagination, this moment in history surely can be credited with its popularization. At least until, the movie franchise showed up.
Oh, yeah. Until Jason showed up.
Until Jason. But that is our presentation on the Knights Templar and Friday the 13th. So we're here for questions. We have a little bit of time. We have 15 minutes for questions.
That was really wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm going to jump in with the first question, if I may.
Yes.
You said that a revived Order of Knights Templar attempted to sue the papacy. I'm assuming that they didn't succeed, but did they have any legitimacy?
No, not really. I mean, it was just definitely a bit of a media ploy there. However, they did succeed in getting Pope Benedict XVI to issue an apology and basically say that the Knights Templar were innocent. So that's something. But it was sort of waved off as a fluff scheme. No, the church is not giving $150 billion to anybody.
Fair, fair.
Any other questions?
Why do you think the charges that they went with, do you think that they were just, well, this seems to work, so we'll keep going with it? Or do you think it was because they were targeting something that they felt people would actually believe about the Templars?
I think that this was both a play on Philip's part to use those charges, and because they had been used to invalidate the head of the church already in Boniface VIII in his original conflict with the Pope as a means to avoid that excommunication. I think it was one of those things that, given that we're talking about crusades and we're talking about the Saracens and heretics and all of that, the heresy charge is an easy one to make sense of. The sodomy one feels like Philip particularly wanted to humiliate people. He was that kind of guy. I see Monica. Monica asks if the Templars were priests or monks or just soldiers. They were just soldiers. You did not have to be a priest to join the order, but I mean, some people were, but it was primarily done through secular armies to start, and so it just sort of built and built and built.
And in terms of, you mentioned that the Templars might have ended up or were offered the opportunity to merge with other orders and then refused. Mm-hmm. Do you think that if they had done so and become less powerful, that they might have been seen as less of a threat?
Well, there certainly was a great deal of resentment towards the Templars, even beyond Philip himself, because of the level of wealth that they had. And it was concerning to multiple powers in Europe that they held too much land, that they had too much money, that they had too much power. I don't foresee that having absolved itself, because anytime you're going to merge with an order, aside from the fact that it would have put them under potentially the King of France, that's just more property and more land held together. The only thing I think it would have diminished them in would have been a fighting force. Like they're at this time, one of Jacques de Molay's big issues about wanting to reform and wanting to stay separate was that there was an ongoing crusade effort about Cyprus, and they were having a really, really difficult time with the fact that there was all this pressure to merge them with other orders, that there was all this conflicting strategies and approaches of what they should do about Cyprus. And Jacques de Molay worried that doing that would just completely undermine any attempt they made at Cyprus. So I think it would have ended the crusade more than diminished the order.
Thank you. Zoe asks, Jacques de Molay's final declaration seems like the kind of thing that is ripe to be adjusted depending on the political issues that people have with the French government of the day. Is this why there's so many versions of his final declaration?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can, and again, because we think that this initial declaration of the curse was written in after the fact, we know that when that happens in history, that it's almost always politically motivated. So the sources that incorporated these quotes were sources that were already dealing with French tyranny and whatnot in Philip's reign and beyond. So that's absolutely valid and ongoing for many papal sources in particular.
Thank you. And Aurora asks, why do you think the Templars got this treatment, but not the other orders?
Because they were the most successful in that way. So they had significantly more money. They had significantly more military wins. They had been a part of some very significant. Because at this point, right, we're talking at the end here, we're talking about when the Crusades were starting to fall off and die and not be successful. But when the order was founded, like this, that was height, peak, successful crusades. So they were very much like heroic, iconic figures who had conquered all these different areas. They had the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Like they were the big guys and they had all the treasure and all the things that come with that. So they were the stars.
Thank you. And in terms of the other orders or other kind of, has there been another order or another body within Catholicism that has ever had that much power outside of the kind of central authority?
Well, I mean, you could make an argument for some of the monasteries. Like Cluny, for example, has had a significant amount of power and influence. Not necessarily, well, I can't even say not necessarily secularly, because they were often our negotiators and whatnot. So these figures were massively important. We may not see them in power in the same way because the Templars obviously have military power. But when you look at orders that go doing the missionary work into the New World and all of that, we could certainly have a discussion about what that sort of power looks like.
Thank you.
I will say that one of the orders that they wanted them to merge with was the Hospitallers, which were similar in a lot of ways, but far less militarily successful, which again was a big part of Jacques de Molay's concerns. Because why would I add all of these people who don't have the training we have, the experience we have, who use our strategies so that I can be undermined in Cyprus? Like, he was not about that. He just figured that dragging down or bulking up these orders would drag them all down. Yeah, exactly. As David says, don't make me hang out with those fucking losers. It's definitely the vibe.
Because the order I was really thinking about was the Order of Malta, but I don't know what that's roots are in terms of if they stretch back that far. But there's certainly have been a powerful order that exists within the Catholic Church.
Yeah, but they're at least as time goes on, slightly more symbolic than particularly practical in these, especially in terms of the Crusades, because at this point we're at the end of them. And so nobody really wanted, after this massive execution of an entire order and a papal bull to dissolve them all, nobody really wanted to step into those shoes. Particularly well, for the year that Philip was still there.
And if somebody had, I mean, so Clement was obviously very much under Philip's thumb. What do you think a stronger pope could have done?
Well, a stronger pope in that sense, like for where we are in the papacy, this is the ascendancy of the French kings into what we would sort of see as like the Holy Roman Emperor sort of role in terms of that relationship with the papacy. A stronger king would have led to a war between the papal states and France, I think, certainly, unless we still had the scenario in which Philip died within a year, because then there might have been more might have been more friendship, but there certainly wouldn't have been with Philip.
So maybe the best thing the Pope could have done would be pray for something awful to happen to Philip.
Well, exactly. I mean, he didn't have to wait that long. If they dragged their feet just a little bit longer, maybe everybody would be okay. They tortured these men for 7 years and held them in imprisonment. If they just waited 12 more months, would have been fine.
There's got to have been a
Clement,
Pope who was capable of dragging things out longer than that then.
Clement sure tried, but again, he was a Frenchman who was already under Philip's thumb. He'd already moved the papacy to France, like, well, right after, in the middle of this happening. So we have a whole 100-year of history caused by that decision alone that puts everything into chaos. So we're certainly not at a period where the papacy was centralized or ascendant in its powers.
Yeah, I mean that itself is like a huge topic that I'm like would love to ask questions
Yeah.
about, but yeah.
Oh, there's going to be a lot of interesting approaches to Pontifacts when we finally get to the Avignon papacy. We have dual popes all the time.
Yeah, that'll be very exciting. Will you be doing sort of dual episodes?
Yes, yeah. I mean, generally we do the anti-popes and the popes on different feeds, but we'll have to go through it very carefully to decide which one was legitimate. So we do have a guiding star in that way with the Annuero Pontifico, but we'll see.
But you have to make your own choices as a podcast. This is the official Pontifex decision as to who was Pope and who was anti-Pope.
Exactly, we're setting the canon. There are a lot of popes. Okay, I was just reading Eleanor's question.
And of course, yeah. So yeah, Eleanor asks, there are a lot of popes. How many years do you think it will take you to get to modern times?
Well, we're 6 years into the podcast and we are over halfway. So that's some indication, especially because I have followed the rule that we only have one episode per papacy to keep everything moving. So there's bonus episodes and whatnot, but you can assume that it's going to take us roughly the same amount of time. Just a crazy thought.
Thank you. And Zoe asks, I know it was often the practice later in history to kill the person sentenced to death and then burn their body, but from your description, it sounds like that wasn't the case here. Is it that the practice wasn't around yet, or was this a deliberate move on Philip's part to make even more of a statement?
Oh, well, burning at the stake was still very common. Like burning live at the stake was very much a common practice for anybody who had committed heresy. So that was absolutely standard practice. However, the fact that it was created deliberately to burn slowly was on purpose, and this is part of the law where if heretics recant their confession, their pyres were specifically set to burn slowly. At least that's one of the sources that has suggested that was a massive part of how they dealt with heretics in France. So that was the custom. It's not until much later that they mercifully kill them before they burn them.
So I guess you do have something to lose by recanting your confession then.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was a known thing too. Like when Jacques de Molay went up and spoke his piece and they recanted their statements, they all knew exactly what they were doing and what they were in for as a result.
Several people have pointed out that you're moving a lot faster than other podcasts that may have just gotten to the invention of writing.
I mean, that's the beauty of the Rexipod formula is we just have that one papacy per episode rule. So it helps a lot. Keeps us
Do you
moving.
think you'll break that rule eventually?
I have bent it for an episode that's coming soon, but you'll have to listen to find out. Bent it, but I haven't broken it.
Joe Pranovich asks, my son wants to memorize all of the popes. Do you recommend Wikipedia or a different list?
The Wikipedia list is what's accurate to what is called the Annuario Pontifico, so it is accurate as much it is accurate according to the church. So yeah, I would suggest that's the list to use, but also what a task. I don't recommend that. There's 266 popes.
I believe he's already memorized all of the prime ministers and kings and queens of England. So,
I mean, there are less than that.
James Bolton asks, could you not pay to have gunpowder put around your neck? I'm sure I read that somewhere.
Later, yes, when gunpowder was around, definitely.
Fair. Yeah, it'd be hard to pay for that beforehand.
That was sort of a Tudor Stuart sort of era thing. So we're still a couple hundred years away from that.
But there wasn't a sort of equivalent era mercy that you could, or that powerful people could receive?
Decapitation, generally speaking. Which is even in the Tudor era, that was considered a mercy. But yeah, it's for someone like Jacques de Molay, there was going to be no mercy. They were making an example out of him. Don't ask the French king to give his money back. Well, I think that brings, is that, oh no, we've still got 5 minutes, 4 minutes.
Yeah, we've got a couple. You said that you're 6 years in. What percentage of popes have you done so far?
We just recorded episode 147, and so 133 is the 50% mark. So we're just a little over, but we're making progress.
So you've probably got another 5 or 6 years to go then.
At least, yeah. It's and they get longer, right? We're going into my area of expertise fairly soon when we get to the Renaissance, and I will definitely want to slow down a lot, but again, the schedule will certainly help with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you might also, when you get into modernity, and well, depending on how you define it, but there'll be a point where there's so much more information that I think quite a lot of podcasts seem to run into, and yeah, it gets very difficult then.
That modernity is absolutely like my least favorite era, so I will be able to be like, oh no, we can only do one episode per pope. So that's when I'm going to stick to the format the hardest. But there will be lots of bonus. Coming very soon, Aurora. We're almost in that era.
Pope Alexander the Sixth.
We've got a couple big episodes coming out this year though for the people who are most excited.
Any teasers that you could give us about upcoming events?
Well, we're very soon going to release the Demon from Hell Pope. So that's a name that people enjoy. We're coming up to the Crusades by the end of the year. So we will be talking about Urban II and the Council of Clermont. What portraits? Okay, so go ahead, read the question.
Sorry, yes. Zoe asks, what portraits are you using to assign points for the popes based on appearance? I am so curious given your commentary during episodes.
So we use the round portraits at St. Paul's outside the walls. So there's one for every single pope that has existed, which is super helpful and consistent. And they're, as we've just recently learned after many years, now that somebody's finally gone in and high res taken photos of these things, they're beautiful mosaics,
They're
not paintings.
Little pieces of stone, and they're all like stacked, and it's a lot.
Yeah. We've been looking at these. I have been to St. Paul's outside the walls. I have seen these portraits. They are very high up, so they look like paintings. They're mosaics, but those are the ones. There is, I think Wikipedia has at least one page that has most of them on it if you wanted to see all of them in one place. It does exist.
How much more space do they have for more paintings? Like, do they have an expectation of how many?
Well, there's a whole conspiracy theory about that.
Oh.
That they're going to run out soon, and that will be the last pope, and then the world will end. There's a whole. That's a whole other presentation we could do.
Well, unfortunately, we are almost out of time. Do you have any closing remarks you want to make?
Come listen to Pontifacts. Come join us for the rest of the conference. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience with all the kerfuffles this morning. I hope you're having a great time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. See you again in future sessions.
Thank you.